Thank you. So welcome to the first of two sessions dedicated to visual effects in the Malta Film Week. My name is Matthew Pullicino. I'll be giving a short overview of who we are. I'm here together with my colleague, James Spiteri. And we're going to be giving an overview of visual effects. Not quite a masterclass as one would expect, because we're going to keep it. We're going to make it appreciable by anybody who's following in. So we're going to keep it light, and we're going to keep the terminology as well basic. But this afternoon, or actually later on today, there's going to be a second talk where we'll go a little deeper into more technical aspects of visual effects. So yes, my name is Matthew Pullicino, and I am the managing director as well as executive producer at Stargate Studios Malta. Stargate Studios is a visual effects company which has different studios in different parts of the world. And my job is to run the local studio and also to represent it as an executive producer. So James and myself are the sales team, and we do this quite often. We turn up quite often to represent the studio to different clients to explain what we do, because visual effects is also still a mystery to a number of people, even people who work in the film industry. So it takes explaining and it takes unpacking, and that's what we hope to do with you today. So, as a quick overview, what is visual effects? Start right at the basics, which is not special effects. Just a quick note, visual effects is not special effects. Special effects is what would happen practically on set in the world of explosions or smoke or water or stunt ropes falling. So that's the practical stuff. Visual effects is what we do digitally. It's our digital intervention to add value to a picture. So just pulled up some very typical examples of green screen. So when you see green screen on a set, or when you see tracking markers and actors, these are the tools that we use on set to work our effects. Most of the work then happens in post-production, so we'll be splitting this in two. But essentially, what we do is we deliver expert digital intervention to add value to a picture. And this can range from designer shots to fixing something in post-production which was not expected to happen on set. So sometimes we're called in to save the day as well on something that was not planned. But most times we like to work on stuff which was planned, because that's where together we can shine with the client and add more value to a picture. Why would you add value to a picture in the digital world? Because it's either impossible to make happen in a practical sense, like we cannot yet film in space or bring to life mythical dragons, or sometimes it's cheaper. So sometimes it's cheaper to deliver a digital environment than fly a whole crew out into the middle of a desert and feed them for weeks on end, and then therefore you would depend on your visual effects department to do that. And sometimes it's safer. So sometimes you would like to film something really dangerous, but not put your actors at risk or set them on fire or throw them off the sides of the building. So that's when you resort to your digital characters or your digital assets, and you blow up those instead of blowing up the real Statue of Liberty or other things which would be unthinkable. And that's what we do. We do that. We come in and we intervene digitally to deliver to the stories that which cannot be practically done on set. And I think we can all appreciate how at the end of the movies, the lists of visual effects artists are growing longer and longer and longer. It's actually one of the biggest portions, biggest departments to nowadays take part in the movies. They are never-ending lists. There are thousands of people around the world who work in this discipline, and they are getting ever bigger, because films and television series are bigger stories nowadays, and they require our help to be able to be told. So what do? We work with brands such as these, with studios such as these. So in our job, especially mine and James as a sales department, we're on the phone with really exciting clients. As a kid, my parents told me I watched too much television. They told me my eyes would go square. But I'm happy I persisted, because it's ended up being the people I work with and interface with. And for me, it's very exciting. On a personal level, I really enjoy working in the television market. It's like a kid in a candy store. And when you meet these people, they all have a problem. they all want something to happen, that they're looking for us as a solution. And that's the creative process that we work in to deliver their problem into our opportunity by using visual effects. So you end up collecting a bunch of posters and jobs. And these are jobs that we in Malta have personally worked on. So in our studios, we put up a picture every time we finish a movie. So it becomes like a Hall of Fame gallery of all the works we've done. And it makes us all very proud. And it helps you remember how old you are when you figure out that something was shot 10 or 15 years ago and that you were doing that. But it also helps you appreciate how technology and how your skill sets have grown. So what's interesting here is my talk is going to keep the subject relevant to the local market, is that even though we work in the local market, most of these films never touched our shores. And that's because we are one of the few crews, local crews, that operate overseas. So we don't wait for a film to come here for the sunshine, or for the sea, or for the tanks, or for the great crews that we have. We actually go and find that work overseas. And therefore, some of these films, most of these films, never touch our shores. The only thing that does come to Malta is a digital file over the internet, and that's when we start to work it in our studio and post-production. Having said that, I said I'll be talking about one aspect of visual effects, and Sam Nicholson will be giving the second talk, and he'll be talking about virtual production, which is a new aspect of visual effects. And I just split down my talk into three, which is our work as producers, the work that happens on set, and the work that happens in a studio to deliver visual effects, which is slightly different to what's happening in virtual production, which I won't go into because I don't want to steal the next presentation. But things get flipped around a little. They're still the same disciplines, but the efforts happen in a different order. But if you work in visual effects, you probably want to have one of these three aspirations, which is either to produce, and you don't need to be an artist to produce. You don't need to have artistic skills to produce. Actually, you need to treat it like a business. You need to have creative solutions, and creativity is important in every aspect of the business. But you need to work the job as a businessman, breaking it down into assets which have time and money against it and viabilities, and you're hiring and you're putting solutions together which are not only going to work in paper, but are going to work in practice. So as producers, we are the people interpreting the script and planning for a visual effect to be executed not only during pre-production or production, but even in post-production. We have to remember, our department is one of the last departments working on a movie. So long after a film has wrapped, we are still going. And sometimes we're dropping in our work in the very final days of mix. The last shots are being dropped in as they get colored and exported. And sometimes we feel like movies never close. Changes always are possible in the digital world. It's not like if you're shooting an actor and you get a performance on the day, that's it. With us, you can always give it another go and give it another change and make another alteration. So the producer has to jump in and try and control that process because it's also a job. There's a financial repercussion to everything that happens in our world. Set supervision is when a few of us turn up to live on set and they plan everything that's going to happen, and James will go into more of this with his breakdown, as our representative on set. Supervisors on set control what's happening on camera whilst the visual effects shots are up. He's part director and part director of photography whilst it's a visual effects shot. I have supervised a bit in the past, and sometimes I've had to call action myself over a big director because it was our shot. So it can be very exciting when the crew turns around to you and they say, "How's it looking, Mr. Supervisor? Is that okay?" And the onus is on you to give the thumbs up. And once you say OK, then they press the button and everything blows up and the green screen flatters in the wind, and you just hope that you've got it because there are 8 cameras rolling on that. Very scary moments when, you know, you have big scenes going up which are going to be extended in post-production. You watch the playback on screen and you hope that what you've got is going to be enough for your artists to turn into a miracle when you go back home. And these are the guys that are working in the studio. These are guys who have a 9-to-5 job. These are guys who are working in digital art and really making a beautiful experience out of their career by interacting with movies, sometimes, you know, from the comfort of your own home. Because you can be a nomad and you can travel with movies around the world, which is a very beautiful experience, but you can also work on movies by working in studios and actually working close to home. You can have a normal life, because working on set can be very challenging and can make demands on your life, you know, when you're away from your family for months on end because you're following a movie. But working inside a visual effects studio is still working in the film industry, but also providing a very creative and very beautiful service in the product that you're creating. Before I finish my little talk, we're going to watch another demo reel, which is a collection of shots that we put together. It's the first time we're showing it because we got the thumbs up from the producers yesterday, and it's the demo reel to Leonardo, which was a television series in 8 parts that showed on Rai Uno, and I think is now going to be, or already airing on Amazon in somewhere. I can't exactly tell you which district has got it on air. But, and James will also be breaking down a scene to explain how these disciplines work. We're open for questions, and do ask if you have any, if we're not being clear, but we hope to be able to explain how our world works and to give you a little insight into what opportunities as well there are to work in visual effects, because one of the things that we really try to do is find talent. We're looking always to be able to train people and offer the opportunity to join this beautiful part of the industry. And there's a lot of opportunity in film, and it's part of the tagline of the Film Week. And there's also opportunity in visual effects, which is a part of the film which maybe we don't know too much about, but James and Sam will help us understand a little more. So can we roll the second reel? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This was a team effort, and I want to make everyone aware that visual effects is all about team effort. We have a very good team working with us here and across the globe as part of the Stargate group. Visual effects is a collaboration between different skill sets, different people. And this collaboration is essentially what makes visual effects, to me, one of the best experiences working in my life, because you get to work with a lot of people, a lot of fun, interesting people, and you get to meet new people. And as Matthew mentioned, we are the sales team and we meet new people. And sometimes, even though we would be speaking with executives, for example, or people who work with bigger companies, you'd be amazed that not everyone really understands visual effects or how visual effects can help a production. I recall one of my first projects working in visual effects with Stargate Studios was a Spanish television series which was set in Morocco but shot in Madrid. So if you understand the geography, they're very different. The land is very different. There's no sea in Madrid. And the actors, essentially for almost all the series, never stepped foot on Morocco. Because we went there, we got the material that we needed to then transpose Morocco in Madrid. And the example I'm going to give you today is an example very similar to that, where visual effects was used in order to take actors in an area or in a situation that practically could not have happened. So the example I'm going to present to you is a show that we worked on a couple of years ago. It's a working title production, and it was distributed by Sky and NBC. It was partially shot in Malta, and the scene that we're going to show you was shot in Malta, also to keep the local context alive. And I will first show you the scene, and then give you a breakdown of more or less the visual effects intervention in that particular scene. So let's start by watching the scene.
Father Jude, thank you for coming. I say some pretty strong things about the church.
The church isn't God, it's just people. Most of them good, some not so good.
No, this is a tactic. They teach you to gain my trust, to talk me down.
I promise you, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Okay, so that's Rob Lowe on the Basilica of St. Paul in Rabat. But was he there? That's a question that you need to ask yourself. So this particular scene, as you can imagine, is very difficult to take two actors up to a bell tower and shoot the scene there. It's a bit complex and difficult and not safe at all. So visual effects was used. So the breakdown I'm going to show you is based on what we call photographic elements. So let me just try not to be too technical. So there are two types of materials that we can use, which we call elements, so little bits and pieces of stuff that we put in a shot. And those can be either photographic elements, so shot by a camera, filmed by a camera, or CG elements, which are digitally created in a computer by artists. For this particular example, we're just going to be talking about mainly photographic elements, because as you saw in the scene itself was set in Rome. You could see the Vatican in the distance. So let me just... so I selected certain shots just to explain the technique. And the technique predominantly used in this particular scene is green screen. What is green screen? Green screen is a fabric that is used to separate an actor, for example, this person over here, to separate it from the background. So the computer, through obviously a lot of work by artists, can separate one person or one element from the background itself so that you can paste it on top of each other. In this example over here, Rob Lowe was never on a bell tower, he was on a green screen. By the way, our session is being streamed live on Facebook and on YouTube, so if you want to write any comments or ask any questions, please do so, and we'll try our best to answer accordingly. So, as you can see, the actors are on a safe platform inside the studio with a green screen at the back. The little crosses on the green screen are called tracking markers, which is essentially a technique that we use so that the computer can understand the movement of the camera and replicate that movement in the background. Again, I don't want to get into too much technical detail, but more or less what we're seeing is that they are not there. And this is the final result. The photographic element that we shot was, again, from the location itself. So we filmed this part of the building to make it obviously match. The lighting matches, the movement matches. There's also a police officer over here, an actor. It helps the scene. The next example is a very interesting example. And again, this was shot on a green screen. But the most interesting example, and this is the power of visual effects, right, is that in this particular shot, we have 3 different countries in one shot. So the foreground, which is closer to the camera on green screen, this was shot in the UK. Part of the background was shot in Rome. Another part of the background was shot in Malta. So over here, we have a mix of 3 different locations in one shot. And as a viewer, you do not see it. You don't appreciate the ton of work of us going on a hotel, telling them that we're taking a coffee. We're taking off a coffee. In reality, what we're doing, we're pulling up a camera to shoot a background. Of Rome, Malta, and London, and the UK. It's quite impressive. It's quite impressive. And this is a very simple example, but it shows the power of movie magic. So, again, another example, we had the actor walking across the ledge whilst the scene was being shot, and if you recall in the scene itself, we had some shots of people in the square, and we had shots looking up towards the bell tower. Those were stunt doubles. So that actually happened on set with wires and safety wires. No one was hurt. And it was a stunt double. So it's not actually the actors, but lookalikes who were there on the bell tower. So this is a mix and match. Another technique that we use is crowd duplication. And during COVID, this has been something that we service a lot. So crowd duplication is the multiplication of people on a set. In this particular example, it was a photographic element that we used. We did not go into computer-generated people. And essentially what we did over here was we created what can be called a split screen. So we split the screen in 2. We got one plate. A plate is a shot, okay? One plate of people on one end. We'll keep the camera at the same position. We've got the other one. And we'll mix them together. So as a producer producing a show, you do not need to hire 30 extras, 50 extras, 100 extras. You can hire less and get more value out of the people you have available and the resources that you have available. And when we do meet potential clients, we are more often than not talking about this reality, that you can look at the possibility of using visual effects in places you were never thinking of using visual effects. And last but not least, this is what we call a burn-in. So we're burning an image, we're creating an image, we're putting an image in a screen, and the screen is actually a blue screen. This actually works also for productions, for example, which would want to have material in a screen, in a television, in a frame, for example, and they still don't have what is going in there, what is going to be added in the monitor. So they shoot green screens or blue screens on monitors, and then we add at a later stage. So what I'm going to show you now is a breakdown of what I just explained and in video, so that you can see the breakdown accordingly. So like I said, if you want to ask any questions, please do so on Facebook Live or on YouTube, and we'll try our best to answer your questions. But essentially, like I said in the beginning, visual effects is a collaborative discipline, and visual effects is one of the elements that makes movie magic. So thank you very much, and we can have your questions.
You mesmerize me. Matthew said, we're not film directors, and then you came out and you showed us things that you need a creative film director who knows his vectors, who knows more than an artistic film director should know. It's highly technical. Please don't explain how it works. I'm saying this to have the pleasure to drop a name, all right, to leave you with your mouth open. When I was using the tank for Clash of the Titans, we built a set, a replica of the Azure window in Gozo, where Pegasus, the flying horse, would descend there, and they tie Andromeda to the rock, and we had the rock on the set in the tank. And of course, the monster comes out to eat the... and we had the set ready, everything, and the, I don't know, VFX director was Ray Harryhausen. Eat your heart out. And he came there, oh, hello, 𝗪𝗔. Tomorrow morning we shoot that. This is looking very good. And he stood there, put his hands like this, and he said, 𝗪𝗔, how do we lose the wall holding the water in the tank? I can see the rocks there. I said, that's not where you put the camera. You put the camera really low. He said, no, I tell you where I put the camera. I said, no, listen, this is my place. I know. You put the camera really low. He said, I know how to line up the set. I am directing the scene because I have to make the miniature stop-go motion monster come out. Oh my God, then you can't do it. You know, the set is built too close to the edge. You have to bring it right forward, which is impossible. It's 3 months' work, all right? Or we raise the depth of the tank. You say, how can you do that? I said, we'll build a wall there, and then one night we built a 150-yard, 4-course wall, blocks of stone, painted it blue, and filled the tank further up. 8:30 in the morning, we were ready for the shooting. That's what you are saving us to do.
Yes.
This is incredible. You know, the world I come from is what you see is what you get. All right? So thank you. Pity I am so old now, I can't enjoy what you're doing. My question is this. Hey, you have to be more than a film director to know where to put your camera. Can you say a few words about that, please?
So Matthew and I have both been on set. I worked as a supervisor as well on some of the work that we had in the studio. My experience on set is one that I encounter these problems more often than not, and sometimes we try and preempt, and these are the discussions that we have with our potential clients. We try and preempt issues that might arise on set. You have to be technical when you're explaining. As a director, as a DP, as any crew member, whenever you have a green screen up, for example, it is set for imagination. You need to imagine what's going to go there. Even if you don't have a green screen, you have to imagine traditional visual effects, adding stuff in computer-generated images, for example. You need to have a creative, you need to have an imagination to know what might be going there. But you need to also be technical to know if what you're shooting is being shot well so that the final effect will look good. Then there's visual production, for example, and Sam later on is going to be mentioning a technique or techniques where you do not need to imagine because you're seeing it there. It's done. It's in front of you. So you do need to be creative.
Let me add something small. In truth, with the technology that exists today, our artists can do anything. When you have talented artists, and we're really lucky to have some very talented artists, they can do practically anything. They can fix nearly every problem. It takes time and money, but they can do it. The truth is that our job is to help the production economize and make more efficient the process in post-production. So the suggestions we give, it's true, nowadays, if you really screw it up, you could probably still fix it. But we try to control the practical sense of the visual effects. And sometimes you're asked to de-age actors to take 30 years off on screen. And it seems impossible, but it can happen. So many things can happen, and many problems can be solved on a PC, on a computer, by a very talented artist. But as producers and as supervisors, our job is to guide the production into a way not to make that intervention impossibly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, where you put the camera, your choice of what, thank you, of where you put the camera, it's your artistic decision. You can imagine the finished product. Correct. And that's a special talent, I think. Yes. Not everybody has that.
Yes, it is, but it can be trained. So if you have people, for example, I mean, we worked with a number of directors, and it's not just the director, to be honest, because it's the team at the end of the day. But we've worked with people who have never worked with visual effects before, and you slowly introduce them to options of what can be done. I mean, I recall back in 2014 when we were doing El Príncipe, which is the Spanish show I was talking about in the beginning. the directors would ask us questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? And we're like, yeah, we can. Maybe if you move the camera slightly this way, we can avoid seeing down the street. We don't need to reconstruct. We don't need to clean up, etc., etc. The possibilities are, at the end of the day, as cliche as it sounds, endless.
The problem is when the production grows confident about what a studio can deliver, they don't call you. They turn up on set and they said, "Oh, yesterday we shot this. I'm sure you can fix it." So that's what you don't want.
Hi, good morning. First of all, thank you for such an inspirational presentation. I know Matthew and James for a long time. My apologies if I missed this earlier, but for the filmmakers here, very often, as you said, a bigger studio can afford to come back and say, we shot this yesterday, can you fix it for us? But for the filmmakers here, for those especially starting up and are maybe not used to using VFX, yes. How early in the process do you suggest that you should come in and help? And why?
So first of all, thank you for the question. I think it's a great question. And I'll start by saying that local productions are a challenge on every level. And it seems that when you wrap production, you hope to have spent the money you needed to spend, and you hope to not spend anymore. And then the visual effects budget comes out of somewhere and needs to be funded. But the truth is, yes, if we get talking before you actually start shooting, at this point in time, we turn up on recce's, pre-production recce's before a director or a cinematographer is attached to the show. We generally are on set with production, with the producers, the executive producers, with the set designers. We turn up on set and we start looking at the viability of the project. And as is happening right now with some of our projects, our feedback goes back to the scriptwriters. And they actually sometimes make changes because we either up what they could do because it's not as complicated as they imagined, or we tell them that this is going to be impossible on the spend that they have. I want to say that software nowadays is really powerful, and before you needed big servers to make stuff happen. You can make a lot happen on your laptop at home. So everybody should be tinkering with this. And you can dream when making a local production to throw in a green screen and to try out stuff yourself, and you can get some very good results if you have an artistic eye and some methodology to it. And there's lots of places to learn. And get an introduction to visual effects as part of movie making. But if anybody has a project, first of all, our first job is to consult. No strings attached. This is a consultation. So I would say get involved as early as possible. Find somebody that knows something and give you some guiding words. And even if you can't afford it, ask anyway. I mean, we've guided, we've consulted, we've given options, and sometimes we've even helped. And we've helped a bunch of local movies. Because when you believe in something, like all of us creatives, you are not giving more than you originally bargained for. So yes, thank you.
Something I'd like to add is that as Stargate Studios Malta, we have a content department. So we shoot our own stuff, we produce our own stuff. And that knowledge of using a camera, knowing how to film and knowing how to approach a production, not just from a visual effects standpoint, but also from a production standpoint, helps us in guiding people of how to avoid visual effects, because either the budget does not allow or there is no need for a visual effect in a particular instance. So again, as local filmmakers and anyone, I mean, we give this advice to some of the biggest people in the industry in Europe. So it's not like it's exclusive to us locals or anyone who wants to create a smaller production. Because at the end of the day, what we care about is that a project looks good, a story is told, whichever means possible. So, yeah, the story is very important.
When we went on our first recce for the Medici series, they told us that they wanted to shoot the cathedral in Florence. But in the story, the dome had not yet been built. And our first site visit to see our proposed location for shooting was the Florence Cathedral. And it obviously was impossible to shoot in there and impossible to make it look like the roof was non-existent, because the amount of sunlight that would come into a cathedral without a roof is very hard to recreate inside a cathedral with a roof, especially one which has millions of visitors constantly. So locking it off, and we told them, we're going to take the shoot somewhere else. We're going to shoot it in another church, which was unthinkable for them at that point in time. But once they started to appreciate the fact that they didn't need to be in Florence to have Florence, then it worked. And they wrote many more scenes inside the cathedral once we figured that they were renting out another place. And they could burn more pages inside there than originally planned.
Hi, very interesting. I'm thinking about a project that we're hopefully doing this year. You talked, when you with the crowd scene, with the one you showed earlier, looking down on them, that there were photographic elements, and also there could be digital elements of a crowd scene. We've got something very similar in mind. Which is easier to actually do and cheaper, let's face it? Would it be having extras there which you duplicate, or would it be entirely digital people?
So the key word in assets is amortization. It's how many times you use them. So creating a great asset is absolutely viable. Spending money on an asset is absolutely viable if you're going to use it a number of times. If you're going to use it only a few times, it's like building a set. It's how much effort you put into it. Photographic elements are generally the cheapest way to go, because you shoot them, and if you shoot them right, they do what you need to do. So that would work for a crowd like this, but if you have a stadium and your show is about football, then shooting photographic elements for a stadium, for every camera angle, for every action, for every team, for every match, for every lighting situation may be problematic. So that's when you would invest in digital assets, which would be digital people to put in there where you can switch out their paraphernalia, their flags. You can put them in different lighting situations. You can press those buttons and get them to do the Mexican wave, which would be harder to do with photographic elements. But the cost in setting them up needs to be justified by the use of those assets during the movie. So I guess you're a producer from the way you're speaking. Director.
Yeah, because it's probably similar to that. So there's probably about 30 or 40 people. And I'm just thinking now, how can we save money? You know, sort of get 5 extras and dress them up in different clothes. And
exactly.
That would be. And if we shot that scene, would we require someone like yourselves to be there and say, look, stick the camera here and do this here and blah, 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 blah?
So in visual effects, the person on set is generally called a visual effects supervisor, who is a person who takes care that from a technical point of view, from a creative point of view, whatever we set out to achieve is being filmed. So if, for example, say the scene with Rob Lowe in the UK, in the studio, our visual effects supervisor was there, making sure that all the tracking markers are there, that all the camera data is being logged, that the intensity of light on the green screen is correct, so that then we can take all that data and process it in post-production. So yes, there would be a supervisor. However, it's always nice to know that something is coming up. As Matthew mentioned, sometimes you just figure it out because you see it in the edit and you see a green screen and you're like, okay, we didn't know this. So it's very important to have someone there. This person then is only a part of a chain of a longer people. So if, for example, we talk about the CG crowds, it's not the work of one person, it's the work of multiple people, from modeling to animating the people, to dressing them up, to lighting them, to rendering them, to composite them, and to deliver them. So it's a collaborative environment at the end of the day that we work in.
A sort of vaguely related question. When do you reckon we're going to be able to get rid of actors entirely and have digital one? Well, I'm an actor as well, so put myself out of a job. Is that going to happen next 10 years?
This evening there's going to be a panel talking about game and film. And in games there are no actors, they're all digital actors. And I think it's going to be an interesting place because that question will be asked. And eventually when they look real enough, then you have an option. So I think the answer is when it's convincing enough, people go for it. And it's slowly getting there. Slowly getting there.
However, it's good to note that, say, for example, to stay on the theme of the crowds, right? An animator who's animating the movement of the crowds is also an actor at the end of the day. You're not seeing that person, but he's there. I mean, most of the animated movies we see, cartoons, for example, animated series, the animators would record themselves so that you get the fluid motion, you get the movement, you get the actions, the expressions. That's still acting at the end of the day. I mean, what can change are big names in films, because using technologies like deepfake, for example, where you face replacing actors who have passed away, and you get a double, for example, and putting, this is visual effects as well, putting the face on top of a double. Who is acting at the end of the day? Is it the original actor, or is it the actual person who's providing the body of the actor? They're still actors at the end of the day. I don't think it's going to be something that will go away. And at the core of the whole thing, and this is some of the discussions that we have, at the core is the story. How are you delivering your story? You can have a story shot on an iPhone, you can have a story shot on a very expensive ARRI camera, for example. It's the story at the end of the day, and the delivery.
Did you do Polly on Gladiator?
No. Well, that is visual effects. That is out of necessity. That is visual effects. It was very crafty for them to use that method. Thank God they had the material before he passed away. And yeah, I mean, we had other films. There were other films which we didn't work on, like Fast and Furious, for example. I know that one of the actors passed away just before shooting or right after shooting. I'm not really a fan of that series, but it's done. It's done, and visual effects can pluck you out of a problem.
Hi, good morning. I was just curious, because in the early 2000s, there was a big conference in Northern California, I think it was, with George Lucas, Martin Scorsese, Oliver Stone, and they were talking about the differences between film and digital. And there was this big fear by a lot of filmmakers going into the digital age. And now, 10 years later, Scorsese makes Hugo, and a lot of these 3D animation films are by the best auteurs in America and in Europe. So I'm curious how you can kind of assuage a lot of purists who feel like film is somewhat compromised by the brilliant whiz kids in Skywalker Ranch or your studios. So I'm just wondering how we can keep the preservation of film intact, and not to get too far into the digital elements, and like you said before, focus on the story. So I'm just curious your thoughts on how to keep film intact and keep moving forward.
The most curious meetings I attend, sales meetings, are when we tell them, you probably do not need our services. We sometimes say, I don't think you need visual effects, yeah? And we walk out on a job because we are not needed. So not every story needs visual effects, and not every movie needs our services, and that's just what it is. I think we need to get involved when we need to get involved. And some stories can't happen without them. Shakespearean theatre would rely on your imagination, and you'd be presented with an empty stage. But film has high expectations. Maybe you can come up with the genre, you can ask your audience to imagine what's on screen, and maybe a studio would buy it. But as things stand, the trend is to keep on upping the game. I think actually, you know, anime is lifting the scope of what stories are told, because it's down to what they can draw with their pencil. And live action and visual effects is catching up with the expectations. So if you want to see how fantastic stories can eventually get, look at the places where people are so free that they can sketch it up with a pencil, and whatever they're drawing goes. So I think stories are going to get bigger, and our techniques are going to become more accessible to people. So I think it's a tool that is enhancing storytelling, just like the book enhanced the word of mouth, no? The fireside story. So is a book a bad technology? Gutenberg. I'm sure. I don't know how much more time we have, but I have the dual role of moderating, and we have another session after this. So, shall we wrap it up? Okay.
Excuse me, can you tell us something about animation? You mentioned animation before. Do you do animation?
Not at the moment. We don't work on animated films, but the techniques and technologies are very similar. So it's a stepping stone. Who knows?
So, just on a final note, when you're sitting in the theater and the movie's over, sit down and watch the credits. Watch all those names that scroll by. And believe me, those are the unsung heroes of the movies. They put a lot of hard work in very tough scenarios, sometimes with pressing deadlines, and being asked to be very creative. And those are really making it happen. So hats off to everybody who really, you know, is lifting the story.
Our crew is watching, Matt.
Our crew's watching, so yes. So hang around and watch the names, and bow your hat to the people that...
We read your names last night on Blood on the Ground.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.